Hey everyone, it's Andrew Nagel, Valk9 Designs, and I'm back with part 4 of the Start to Finish Hybrid series. Here we're going to cover the pre-polish of the foundation we've built, the stone setting, and the design. So jumping right into it, I'm first using the super rough polishing wheel. I will add Rio item numbers for all of these tools and tips in the description down below, but basically what I'm doing is removing the first layer of that kind of, gray look that the silver gets after it's sat in the pickle pot overnight. So as you remember, last tutorial this ended super, dark from the fire scale from soldering. So I have thus let it sit in the Rio pickle overnight, and now I'm polishing it up with the silicone wheels and silicone bristle discs, progressing from the highest grit, or the lowest grit to the highest grit. The yellow one was the 80 grit, the red, or the brown as I consider it, is the 220 grit that you see right here. The next one I'm using is the 400 grit, which is the blue silicone wheel, and then I will be finishing up this with the pumice grit, which is the pink silicone bristle disc from 3M. I'll be leaving item numbers for these in the description, so hopefully they're very easy for you to find on Rio Grande. As you can see, the metal just gets progressively brighter as we use these silicone wheels to remove a layer of metal. That's what happens when you're polishing, so you do need to be careful with how much you polish. I mean, I know that sounds kind of weird, but if you're using thin wires on a piece, you don't want to hit it with the 80 grit for too long because it will eat through thinner metals. Because when you're polishing, you're removing that much of a grit or micron from the surface of the metal. So I've taken my 21 gauge squares and I've bent them into little kind of teardrop spirals coming from each side, and then the wire then progresses up, and I will be utilizing some 30 gauge to bind these together later. Just making sure everything sits where I want it to. This is another great use for the needle nose pliers, is to just kind of adjust your swirls if you need to. And so that way these lines just kind of drop down and then swirl into the pendant design. And then we're going to bend those 21 gauge wires to run along the same curves that we've opened up with our half round wires from before. These lines are going to run along those half round wires and be connected with 30 gauge round wire, which you'll see later in this part. And so after this, we're ready to start setting the stones. I wanted to just make everything flat so that way this next part would be as easy as possible. I'm coming in with the flat bezel pusher. I will again leave item numbers for these tools as well. And I'm just pushing that metal ever so slightly over my topaz stone, making sure that it sits where I want it to. Usually, it's easier with like a flat-backed cabochon. This stone has some terminations on the back, and so it's not exactly flat, but I just wanted to make sure it didn't shift over much. And so I'm pushing down the front part over the end of the crystal, over the top of it. This will be the bottom of the pendant though. And then I'm setting in the side metal as well, pushing that in. I've taken off some of the corners, as we saw in the last video, of this bezel, just so that way the corners are open and pushing these ends down is just a bit easier. That also helps just reduce the effect of the leftover metal and stuff that you sometimes get when you're pushing a bezel around a stone. And I also thought it would just be nice to leave open some extra spacing on this crystal just to allow some more light in, or out I guess, and to allow just more sight into the stone itself. I wanted to just do a very simple setting for this crystal so that way I could showcase it as best as possible. So once we've got all of our sides pushed in, we'll be ready to polish them. I am going to adjust them just a little bit more with this flat bezel pusher. But as you can see, the stone is set in there. And I'm also going to use this on the top end just to push in that metal and make sure it is fully flush against the stone. you want to make sure your corners are pushed down and that there's no flaps of metal, and so if you have any odd points up, try and slowly work them down with a kind of wiggle rotation, so like you're moving back and forth with your hand and just trying to slowly push that metal down. You don't want to push too hard. You want to apply slight pressure, but most of it's done in the motion of the wrist and moving that metal over the stone. The top part of the metal here does need to be pushed down a bit, so I'm going to be using this pointed bezel pusher to push in that top part there and get this stone set all the way. Now that it's set into the frame where we want it to be and it's not going anywhere, we're ready to start drilling the tube settings, and so I'm using a stone setting burr. This is a 3mm stone setting burr to drill out this hole. And then that is a pretty easy way to get the stone setting almost perfectly set to the back of your stone. I'm just cleaning out some of the extra metal with an old burr that no longer has a tip on it. I'm just kind of poking out some of that metal and pulling it out. And then we're going to be checking to see if this seat is good for our stone. I'm using a rhodolite garnet and a tsavorite garnet for this design. Plopping that in there, and it looks like it sits pretty wonderfully. So I'm going to go ahead and push that bezel around that tube set stone, and we're going to get that thing set in there. Sits pretty nicely. Again, with these, you only want about like a 1/2 millimeter, maybe even just 1 millimeter of metal setting over the stone. You don't want a lot of metal going over your faceted gemstone. The point of them is to have as much exposed so as much light comes out as possible. You don't need the back open for light to come through because these are designed to accept light through the face of the stone and then reflect it from all of the facets on the back. I'm using this bezel setting punch set. I'm sure you've seen these in other videos. I use this quite often for my tube settings. I'm using the 4.5mm punch to push this over, and I know that's kind of confusing with the name punch because it sounds like you're going to hit it, but all you want to do is put that punch into the hand setting that comes with the whole set, and you just want to use a rotating motion at various different angles, you know, rotating the whole piece by like 45 degrees, then doing that bezel punch set again, and then rotating it by 45 degrees and doing it again. You want to get a nice even bend of that metal around the stone, and since we got it set in there pretty nicely, we're ready to move ahead with the tsavorite garnet and do the same thing. I used the 3.5mm punch set for setting this stone in the, I believe it was a 2.99 tube, and I used a 2.5mm stone setting burr to drill out the hole. And so it's pretty easy once the stone is in there. Once you've drilled your hole with the stone setting burrs, it makes it super easy to drill the hole because it leaves a nice seat for the stone to set in, so it's not wobbling around with a round stone setting burr. Those can kind of be a little frustrating sometimes. But once you've got the stone set, you're ready to make any final adjustments you need on your square wires, and then we're ready to tie this down with some 30 gauge wire. I'm just going to be doing a simple weave pattern and a little kind of opening weave detail on the right side just to create that swoosh pattern that you've seen in a lot of my work. Again, we're doing this with the 30 gauge round wire. Feeding this through to the back, and then wrapping the 30 gauge around the square wire. And as I wrap that around the square wire, I'm then going to use the simple X-weave pattern to move this 30 gauge wire over to the half round wire and tie them all into place and start building up that opening weave that I want on the right side between these two half round wires that we have on the right side of the detailing for this piece. So again, I'm just using the 30 gauge and just wrapping it once around the outermost half round wire, then I go into the innermost half round wire, and I'm just going to be doing a progression where the innermost half round wire has more 30 gauge wrapped around it than the outermost. If you want more of a detailing on this, go ahead and go to the search bar for the posts here, and you can search for like spiral weave detail. That shows a good way to on how to get the opening of the spiral detailing, and I have a few other tutorials where I cover this as well. And then as I progress up, I'm going to be incorporating the square wire into this detailing as well by attaching it to the half round wire that we have running in the middle of our detailing here. And as I get to the point where I'm at the top of this tube setting, I'm then going to start bringing this 30 gauge over to the other side, and I'm going to create a little kind of weaved, like kind of webbed open area here that attaches itself over to the half round wire on the other side, thus weaving all 5 of these wires together. I know that sounds a little complicated, but it's really not too crazy. Get experimental here and try and find a weaving pattern that looks good to you. And find what works best for you. You don't necessarily have to do exactly what I'm doing in these videos. You know, find something that helps your piece stand out amongst the rest. And then as I'm incorporating this square wire to the half round wire on the left side, I'm just using a simple X-weave pattern to bring them together. Nothing too fancy, and then I'm bringing that wire back over that open space above the tube setting to create a fan opening weave with the 30 gauge wire and the 21 gauge square. Progressing along that weave pattern. And then as we get near the top, we're going to continue to incorporate this 21 gauge square just to hold it in place and to hold that spiral detailing in place as well. I'm going to finish up this weave opening up through the top and then also fanning open with the 21 gauge square up top. Then we've incorporated that top part. As you can see on the back, I've wrapped them together between the half round wires and the square wires utilizing the 30 gauge round, and I just fanned open that top part a little bit with the 30 gauge round. I'm now clipping off all of my extra components that I don't need and getting them ready to bend back and connect to the frame. Bring those half round wires through the openings that we created in the earlier parts of this tutorial. If you haven't seen them, you can go back on my page and find them. They're posted chronologically, parts 1 through, however many there are in the start to finish series. This is not the only one I've done, so if you want to see some wire wrapping tutorials that are start to finish for just wire pieces, those are further back on my page as well. So I want to crimp those ends down onto that opening, but I want to be careful just to not bend the sheet metal around too much. And just flattening down those points and straightening everything out. I'm then also going to do that with this final half round wire and attach it to the frame. But before I do that, we do need to create the bail, and we are going to attach that bail to this middle half round wire and have that square wire feeding through the bail as well. But we can attach this outermost square wire to this tie down point. So what I'm going to do is just take that square wire, clip off my extras, and then I'm going to feed it through the loop and attach it down to this silver loop that we've created with the half round wire. Just going to create a nice little curve where it flows into the opening and then tie that piece down. So now that we've gotten all the points tied down that we can, we are ready to build the bail for this piece. I'm going to be removing the extra 30 gauge wires as well and tying them to various different tie down points on the back. But yeah, once we have built the bail, then this piece will be ready for the final polishing and oxidization. I hope you enjoyed this next part of this detailing video for the start to finish hybrid design. Let me know your feelings in the comments, and I hope you have a great week.